Hi, today I want to speak to you about a certain type of a person. Let's say this is a person who wants to move toward people. You might ask, well, what's wrong with that? It's the most healthy, natural thing to want to bond with people, to fall in love and be loved, to seek affection. Well, it actually is quite normal, but there are times when people are looking to merge, looking to get close for unhealthy reasons. How can you distinguish somebody who really wants to make a true connection, a true loving connection, and somebody who really doesn't, but somebody who has a problem and is using love in an unhealthy way? And we might even say at that point it's not really love. And we're going to talk about what it actually, if it isn't love, what actually is it? The difference is that the person is, who doesn't get the love he wants, is not automatically going to have an outbreak of psychological symptoms. He's not going to have a panic attack. He's not going to go into a depression. He's not going to fly into rage or become detached and move away from people. No, a person who really has a good desire, a healthy, normal desire for a loving relationship, is somebody who is able to focus on that person and give that person what he believes she needs, to try to become a part of that person's life and anticipate what's going to make her happy, and try to provide it, try to fill in, and in any way that he can or she can, make the other person, the loved person's life more full, more complete. Okay, so a husband may not be able to do the cooking for the wife that she has to do because he doesn't know how to cook. But he anticipates that she has to cook, and he goes to the store and he buys the things that she needs. He takes the list, he goes out, and in that way he joins and becomes a part of her, a part of her life, one soul. So what goes wrong in the case of people that are moving neurotically too close? That, well, we see that these people are trying to resolve an anxiety, a basic anxiety and insecurity that they feel within themselves in an unhealthy way. A person who wants to become merged and is, in a sense, live through another person is a person who cannot pay attention to her own feelings. She cannot allow herself to even know what she feels, because she has to make the person that she's latching onto, that she supposedly loves, this strong person who's going to protect her and provide for her needs, because she always needs help. Her motto, so to speak, is just love me no matter what. Love, as we say in quotes, can solve any problem, right? So she needs to be, in order to, so that's number one, is that she needs to have, or he needs to have, usually one particular person that they are going to connect to and become dependent on as well. And that person's needs become paramount. This type of compliant person, this person that has this dependency need, may not be able to initiate and do things for himself that he really needs to do for himself. He can pull himself together and become very productive in the service of doing for that person he's dependent on. Or he can do for himself, but only if that person he's depending on wants him to do it for himself. Everything depends on the other person. So, this is a an urge to feel safe, we are saying, rather than an urge to give true love. We're going to see that this urge to feel safe is the binding up of that insecurity that the person has. And they feel that they're in a sense using the other person like a drug, to numb the pain of dealing with that issue within them that will not allow them to be who they really are and grow and flourish in the way that they can, using their real talents and real abilities to have a solid self-esteem. You see, self-esteem really can't grow when a person is twisted in this neurotic type of solution to anxiety by becoming overly attached, where their whole lives are dominated by this wish to be loved and cared for and guided and taken care of and strengthened through a connection with someone who's strong. Now, the connection with somebody who's strong is also made in a very indiscriminate way. That means that because this whole need for love is so urgent and it's so desperate and it's so compelling, and because the person doesn't know his own real feelings and is not in touch with his own values of what he really wants, he'll go after anybody who he perceives as being strong. It doesn't necessarily mean that the person he's going after is a person who has good morality or shares his values in some fundamental ways. He'll still go after and try to connect and attach himself to such a person because in a compulsive way. That means because he must connect to somebody fast rather than have the patience to be able to think through, is this a good decision for me? Is this really the type of person that I want to connect to and that I want to rely on? Do I want to put myself in this person's hands? So, this person who, as we're going to see, is unfortunately not close with Hashem now, is disconnected from Hashem now because he's disconnected from who he really is, from his real self. He's covered with all kinds of layers of klipot in the form of sadness, depression, anxieties, worries. And because of this, he doesn't have access to himself, to who he really is. And then the nachash, the Yetzer Hara, can come into him and get him to be acting compulsively, to be acting in a way that is not to his true benefit. So this is not something, obviously, that is the person's fault, but the person has to we're going to talk a little later about the process of cheshbon hanefesh, of going into oneself and taking these layers of klipot off, and then the light of truth will shine, and the person will see that he's not even, these problems have nothing to do with him. They are not him, in fact, at all. They have just been intruded. He's been attacked. And these things have been superimposed around his self, around his real self. Anyway, the person who's looking for love in a very unhealthy way, this person must convince himself that everybody is nice. He must look at everybody in a naive way. he must go with a gullibility, so to speak, because to not do that, to not look at everybody as nice and to look at himself as nice, is dangerous, because then maybe some of his own feelings that are not so nice will start to break through and become more into his awareness. You see, here's the other side of the equation, is that the person who's looking for love in a very unhealthy way, and who is developed this persona of being a very sweet person who never challenges you, who never argues with you, who accepts what everybody says, is very easygoing, very submissive, very soft-spoken. This type of a person is not all of those things underneath. Remember, the snake has somehow found his way in, the Yetzer Hara has infiltrated the person's unconscious mind, and the other side of his neurotic conflict is full of aggressive impulses and hostile impulses, and he too has a wish to dominate and to he has a lot of feelings that towards other people that are not so nice. He has his own inner but repressed feelings of rage and wanting to hurt other people. He's angry deep down because he has to be dependent on other people. He's angry at himself, and he's angry at the people that he depends upon. But this aspect of the problem has to be kept underground, because he believes, at least in another part of him, believes that the person who he's drawing strength from needs him to be helpless, needs him to be powerless. So in a sense, he's doing the other person a favor by being helpless, by being agreeing to everything and overly solicitous. He's doing that person a favor, and and he's doing himself a favor by being passive, because then and only then can he get that strong person that he perceives has all the magic power to save him, to be able to give him the strength. He's only going to get strength from that person if he stays helpless. So here, in this type of person, weakness becomes an asset. All right? So, again, we're talking about the Yetzer Hara. So there's a double motivation here, right? One is to keep the other, one is to be overly solicitous and get love, and the other is to keep one's own callousness submerged. Again, because this isn't a real solution. This isn't real love. This isn't a real desire for connection with Hashem. It is a neurotic solution. And therefore, the person is trying to keep at bay aspects of himself that are really, again, been sent to him by the evil inclination, and he's very fearful of looking at those parts of himself. Now, what would be the answer? The answer would be to be able to do a cheshbon hanefesh, to be able to look at the dark side of the equation. The part of his unconscious mind, the part that's hidden from him, that sometimes wants to kill the person that he feels dependent on, or she feels dependent upon. Why doesn't he want to look at his own murderous impulses? Well, because the Yetzer comes and tells him, if you will start to look at your own anger, then you're going to discover that you're going to even become more angry. That's all of who you are. And you're going to be that way all the time. The Yetzer says, don't look at anything. Just keep going the way you're going, right? But what happens when a person begins to look at his own hostility, his own repressed wish to exploit other people, to face the truth, which is so hard for all of us, that we do, most all of us have buried within us very hostile, animalistic urges and instincts that were sent to us by the Yetzer Hara. And the more he can keep us blind to those aspects of ourselves, the more that these aspects of ourselves can operate in a subterranean way and influence us, unfortunately, influence our thinking and our behavior and our moods and our relationships all day long, without us really knowing why we just got into a terrible mood, or why you just snapped at somebody, or why all of a sudden you're reacting to somebody you don't even know with jealousy or rage or something like that. By looking at these unsavory aspects of ourselves, what we do is we shine the light of truth on them by recognizing the enemy and bringing the enemy to the surface. What happens is it begins to dissolve. It begins to shrink, because under the light of day, Hashem's light, the light of truth, Hashem being truth himself, there is an immediate loosening of the conflict and an immediate sense of relief. Then the person sees that threat that the Yetzer Hara gave, that by looking at one's unsavory qualities, that we're going to get worse, right? And that you're going to feel bad. That's exposed as a lie, because the person realizes that thing that's been controlling him, that anger that's been controlling him, is not really coming from his real self. And now he has the energy to realize the difference between the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov. He realizes and has a chance now to make connection with his soul, his only real self, and to be able to look at yourself and make the effort and have the will to face these resistances. That energy that enables a person to go against the Yetzer Hara and to say, no, I'm going to examine what is my obstacle. Why am I reacting to this? Why, and look for the underlying cause. That energy is the energy of his soul. That ratzon, that will, is coming from his soul, and it's coming from Hashem. And this only gives him more emunah by speaking freely about it and acknowledging these defects that have managed to work their way into the person. By recognizing them and speaking about them and unearthing them, they will disappear. And the person it may not be the end of the process of cheshbon hanefesh, of looking into oneself, of doing therapy on oneself, and of analyzing oneself. This is a lifelong process. But now you have more energy and more willpower and more emunah to focus on going further and going deeper into yourself. So, there's a person a young lady, let's say, who is very over-solicitous, very eager to please her husband, very submissive, who doesn't fight back or speak back when she's getting unwarranted criticisms from her husband, and when her husband is attacking her emotionally. the person just takes it, because, again, she has to maintain this persona of being unflappable and of being able to just deal with anything for the sake of love, for the sake of being together with a husband. Well, how does she really look at her husband? She doesn't really have the capacity to love her husband. She does, of course, have the capacity to love her husband, her true self, her real self, her God-given soul is capable of perfect love. But she's so out of touch with who she is, and she's had to persuade herself to use strategies that go so much against who she really is and what she really believes in. She's become progressively so alienated from who she really is that she's attached herself to a man who's a ruthless tyrant. Now, deep down in his soul, he also has holiness, and he has kedusha, he has purity, he has wisdom, he has all of the good midot. He can love and he can give. But his personality has become so twisted and so distorted that for him to show open signs of affection would seem to him to be a foolish thing to do. It would actually, in his mind, show that he's a weak person. His whole persona, his whole way of dealing with marriage and with relationships is to dominate and to force his will. This is how he shores up the insecurities within himself, and how he subsequently blocks out the light of his neshama, of his true, his nefesh, of his real self. So what happens is that the young lady will over-idealize this man. She'll try to look away from his obvious defects, and she'll say, he's so brilliant, he's making so much money, he's so successful, and she'll live through those qualities that she believes, and they could be real qualities that he has. He might be brilliant and he might be wealthy. And she will live through those, through his prestige. And she'll feel like something, like a somebody, through him. It's a very spurious way of getting self-esteem. It's not real, core, solid self-esteem based upon her accomplishments, or even based upon a realistic appraisal of who she's married to. But by looking at some of the qualities that he has that are nice, fine qualities, she elaborates on them, perhaps exaggerates them in her mind, builds them up, until he becomes this idealized person who is almost godlike in her mind. And from him, she draws the strength to go on. Now, what happens when she begins to shine the light of Hashem, in a sense, the will, the light of looking into herself and understanding why she's in this marriage? Because after all, sometimes it gets to a point where this whole veneer breaks down. And for that time, she can't go on deluding herself and believing all of these false ideas that she has about him and about their life together. That can happen to a person when suddenly violence erupts, when the person realizes that the spouse is not treating the children in a proper way. And then all of a sudden, these things break down, these defenses break down. Now, what happens at that point, if she has the energy, the will, if she has even a little bit of emunah to begin to look inside herself, and sometimes a person needs help with this, to honestly face those demons. Well, what is she going to discover? Okay, she's going to discover that, first of all, unlike she's always trying to persuade herself, she doesn't always want to be in her husband's company. Whereas before she thought that she has no secrets from her husband. She can say anything. She's not hiding anything from him. He's unique. He's godlike. She can trust him with anything that really now she sees that she can't. And she starts to understand that really some of the motivating factors that have led her to become overly attached to him is that she wants his money, right? He's got money, and she wants to have that money and all of the things that money can buy. Well, what is that? That's an exploitative attitude. Now, she never thought of herself before as wanting to exploit her husband, as of wanting to be nice and placating and sweet and loving to him so that she could have the status of being the one of her sisters who can go out and spend more money and put nicer clothing on her children and dress them up on the Jewish holidays to look always up to date and better than everyone else. But you see, as she has the emunah to look in herself more honestly, to know that these things are not really coming from the essence of who she is, she has the ability to accept that, yeah, she has these unsavory things in her as well. She wants to take a vindictive triumph over her sisters. She wants to, in her mind and also in reality, to show them that she's superior. So you see, this person who acts inferior all the time has another side to her. Yes, she's willing to undergo the pain of being married to a man who's openly exploiting her, treating her almost like a slave, getting her to submit, and always trying to find different angles of being able to win over her and be one up on her. But in her dreams, in her unconscious mind, it's she who is the one who's superior, who's outwitting him, who's the clever one, who's getting her way in the end. Why? Because she gets all the prestige, and now she lives in the, she's a part of the upper class, so to speak. Okay. So, we encourage people now, so we're talking about the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, and the conflict that they get into, and how, with Cheshbon HaNefesh, a person can be able to look at the truth, and sometimes need some guidance to do that, but to be able to look at the truth and look at what's really going on, and in so doing, to become liberated and have immediate relief. What this actually is a form of teshuva. Teshuva is a returning to Hashem. It's also a returning to ourselves. By being honest with ourselves, by speaking openly, by writing notes, keeping a diary. By keeping a diary and tracing your progress, right? Then you're really returning not only to Hashem, but you're returning to the Hashem in you. returning to your true and holy soul, which is your real self. Once you've come back to yourself, then you feel as though you can be, you can ward off these foreign influences more easily. So teshuva is this whole process of immunotherapy, you might say, is not only a process of cheshbon hanefesh, but it's also a process of teshuva. There are elements of confession when a person is working with a therapist, an immunotherapist, for example. There are aspects of confessing about having these, quote, bad thoughts, and and there's elements of regret that a person expresses outwardly to Hashem and to the therapist that he has for having harbored resentful attitudes towards others and hostile attitudes towards other people. And so this is a very freeing process. It's a very freeing process to be brutally honest, to be very, very brutally honest. Now, again, there are the Yetzer comes into other. There are other therapies, for example, or there are other people that might tell you, no, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't look into yourself and examine the deep, dark aspects of your personality. Well, the truth is that if you don't, those dark parts aren't going to automatically go away. Hashem wants us to seek Him. He wants us to seek the truth. And the truth can only be found by facing the fact that they're there. And then they pop out and they cause you difficulty and get you stuck in your life. So we have to go full steam ahead. It's not easy work, but there are no shortcuts when it comes to doing a thorough examination of the obstacles and the resistances to our growth and our resistances to being able to live healthy, in healthy relationships and serve Hashem in a genuine way, in a real healthy way. Okay. So people may look as though they are healthy because they're not challenging, again, this type of person, this overly compliant person can be perceived, and she may know that she's being perceived this way and get secondary gain from it, that she's being looked at as being some kind of tzaddik. She looks like she's some kind of an angel, because she never fights back and because she always doesn't look at what's going on. But it's not a mitzvah to deny reality. It's not a mitzvah to hide your head underground like an ostrich, and not see the signs, and not see the messages that Hashem is giving you, that, for example, your spouse needs help, or that somebody is not acting properly. It's not a mitzvah to hide yourself from the truth, because again, we have to remember that Chasoma Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Emes, the sign, the seal of the King, the way He stamps everything that He sends out, all His correspondence to us, is by signing His name, truth. Emes means truth. That's Hashem. So He wants us to seek the truth. He wants us to connect to what's real. And let's face it, resistances are going to come up. People start this process and they start and they stop many, many times. And sometimes this starting and stopping can go on for years or even decades before a person has an Eis Ratzon, the person has that moment of truth, or maybe Hashem is just giving the person a free gift. We should all get that free gift today, and utilize that gift of being able to say, okay, I'm not going to be depending on miracles. I'm going to set up a program to help myself by looking at my resistances and my obstacles every single time. Whenever you can have a regular time to do it every day. This is part of the personal prayer session that we recommend, particularly the cheshbon hanefesh part of it. But even when we're not doing the formal personal prayer, during the day, when you get some reaction that you don't understand in yourself, when you start to feel all of a sudden an insecurity or a lack of confidence, or you feel your self-esteem plummeting and you feel inadequate or angry, let's find out why. You can do introspection anywhere you are, standing on a line, sitting in your car. You can ask yourself, where did that come from? And be open to the images and the ideas that Hashem sends you. Take everything that comes into your mind seriously. If something comes into your mind that is not a pleasant thing, don't immediately dismiss it. Consider that it may have some important meaning for you. Okay, so we'll talk more about this in Yirtzeh Hashem in coming weeks. For now, I want to wish all of you great bracha and hatzlacha. Anyone that needs a refuah shalema should have it. Anybody that needs a shidduch, you should find your shidduchim. Anybody that needs children, you should have all the children that you need and all of the panosa, all the livelihood that you need. And we should soon see the coming of Mashiach, Tzidkenu, B'mheri Yameinu. Amen.